Welcome to Security Thursday Leadership and Digital Sovereignty. This is not just about security controls or frameworks. It's about responsibility, clarity, and the decisions that shape how secure an organization really is.
And, we really have to look at this because, well, did you know that some of the absolute most expensive, just completely debilitating corporate data breaches recently, they weren't even started by, like, some brilliant nation-state malware?
Wait, really? Not some highly sophisticated hack.
No, not at all. It was literally just a tired employee who just didn't want to wait 5 seconds for some cumbersome internal authentication process.
Oh, wow. Just bypassing it for convenience.
Exactly. I mean, we are just so obsessed with this idea of the digital perimeter, right?
Mhm.
But the perimeter has moved. It's no longer sitting on some server rack in a basement.
Right, it's sitting in the minds of the people actually building and managing those systems.
Precisely.
So for this deep dive today, we are pulling directly from the extensive philosophy and systemic frameworks of Stephanie Davis. Specifically, we're looking at his concepts of modern leadership within our current, VUCA environment.
Yeah, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a mouthful, but it's the reality of how we work now.
Right. And the core mandate from his work that we're really going to unpack for you today is this German phrase, gestalten statt verwalten, which basically translates to shaping instead of administering.
Which is such a crucial distinction.
It really is, because we are completely bypassing the standard vendor pitches today, right? No compliance checklists, no endless acronyms. We are going to examine the actual, psychological and leadership mechanics of cybersecurity.
Yeah, because that psychological lens is exactly where the true systemic vulnerabilities hide.
Yeah.
I mean, we spend just an exorbitant amount of time, energy, and frankly, capital looking at the technical architecture.
Oh, definitely. Millions of dollars.
Right. We obsess over zero trust implementations and, network segmentation. Yet we almost completely ignore the human architecture that actually has to operate within those technical bounds.
Yeah, the people pushing the buttons.
Exactly. And if that human architecture is fundamentally flawed, like if it's built on fear or just bureaucratic administration or cognitive overload, the technical architecture is just inevitably going to be bypassed.
I think we really need to start by defining the overarching theme of the source material we're looking at today, because Davis identifies this as the security paradox.
Oh, yes.
The paradox. And this is a phenomenon I see constantly in enterprise environments, An organization decides, okay, we need to mature our security posture. So they secure this massive capital expenditure budget.
Right. They get the big check.
Exactly. They deploy top-tier unified threat management systems. They roll out these aggressive data leakage prevention tools across all the endpoints. They put in biometric scanners for physical access.
Basically buying the absolute best-in-class digital armor available on the market.
Yeah, exactly. And then the board reviews the expenditure. They see all these flashy brand names of the vendors, and everyone just assumes the risk has been mitigated. Problem solved.
And that assumption right there, that is the exact catalyst for the paradox.
How so?
Well, the security paradox is this counterintuitive reality where as the financial spending on those automated, highly visible technical protections goes up, the actual sense of personal responsibility among the employees actually shrinks.
Wait, it shrinks, so they care less.
Yes. And critically, it shrinks among the executive leadership team too. The organization is essentially trying to purchase its way out of systemic responsibility.
Oh, I see.
It's this well-documented psychological concept known as cognitive offloading. In this context, I like to call it the bystander effect of enterprise IT.
The bystander effect. That's a great way to put it. So the workforce looks at this massive multi-million-dollar security apparatus, and the internal narrative just shifts.
Right. Security is no longer viewed as this shared, continuous cultural posture. It just becomes a utility, like the HVAC system or the plumbing.
Right. You just expect the water to flow when you turn the tap. You don't think about the pipes.
Exactly. The subconscious assumption is that these heuristic engines and the automated alerts, they're doing all the heavy lifting. So, a SOC analyst sees a minor anomaly in the network traffic.
But because the expensive platform didn't flag it with a giant high-severity red alert.
They just ignore it. They delegate their own professional judgment to the vendor's algorithm.
Right.
And that delegation is the exact moment the security posture just completely degrades. But, I want to explore why leadership teams are so susceptible to this.
Why they love buying the tools so much.
Exactly. Buying a UTM or a DLP solution is a discrete, measurable action. It fits perfectly into a quarterly objective, right? You
Mm.
buy it, you deploy it, you check the box for the auditors, and you move on.
Yeah, it looks great on a slide deck.
It looks fantastic. But cultivating a culture of continuous security awareness or actually changing how an organization handles failure, that is messy. It's ongoing. It is deeply human.
That falls under the Stalton, the shaping part.
Yes.
Yeah.
Buying a tool is just for all administering. And administrators love tools because tools are perfectly legible on a balance sheet.
Okay, but wait, I really need to push back on this framing a little bit
Sure.
because I understand the psychological trap of cognitive offloading, absolutely. But I think we're sort of ignoring the reality that these technical solutions are incredibly effective.
They are effective, yes.
Right. Like if we look at safety in other complex environments, let's take automotive engineering, for example. If I drive a modern vehicle that's equipped with lane keeping assist and, autonomous emergency braking, blind spot monitoring.
You're definitely safer.
Exactly. I am statistically much safer on the highway than I would be in some vintage car from the 70s. The technology genuinely works. So why doesn't deploying a $10 million enterprise firewall make a company objectively safer? Why are we assuming that adding a sophisticated tool inevitably makes an employee more reckless?
That's a completely fair question.
Uh-huh.
But we have to look at behavioral economics and risk compensation to answer that. Specifically, something called the Peltzman effect.
The Peltzman effect.
Yeah. So when anti-lock brakes and advanced safety features were first standardized in consumer vehicles, researchers observed something really fascinating. Drivers subconsciously recognized that increased safety buffer, right?
Right?
And they consumed it by engaging in riskier behavior. They literally drove faster in adverse conditions. They followed the car in front of them more closely.
Oh, wow. So they basically ate up the safety margin.
Exactly. The technological advantage was offset by human adaptation. So in the context of enterprise security, this means we have to make a really vital, uncompromising distinction between a tool and a control.
A tool versus a control. So like the hardware and software versus the actual operational reality.
Yes, precisely. A tool is just a tangible asset. Your $10 million firewall is a tool. Your fancy biometric scanner is a tool.
Right.
A control, however, is the actualized reality of human behavior interacting with that tool.
Okay, can you give me an example of that?
Sure, let's step away from the digital for a second and look at a physical manifestation.
Hmm.
Imagine an organization installs this massive solid steel biometric vault door to protect their most sensitive physical infrastructure.
Like a server room.
Yeah, critical server room. Now, that door is an incredible tool. It is mathematically virtually impossible to brute force.
Right, it's locked down tight.
But if the corporate culture demands that employees constantly move in and out of that room carrying heavy equipment, and the biometric scanner takes 5 seconds to authenticate each person every single time,
Oh, I see where this is going.
what is the inevitable human response to that friction?
Somebody is absolutely going to prop that door open. They'll use a chair or wooden wedge or a fire extinguisher just to get the job done faster.
Exactly. They prop a $10 million vault door open with a $5 wooden wedge.
That's hilarious, but terrifying.
It is. And in that moment, the tool remains perfect. The door is still physically flawless,
Yeah.
but the control ceases to exist entirely.
Wow. Yeah, the control is just gone.
And furthermore, the tool has actually now been weaponized against the defenders.
Wait, how is it weaponized against them?
Because the executive team sitting on the top floor, they still believe the vault is secure. Because they paid the massive invoice for the door, they have an illusion of safety that entirely blinds them to their actual exposure.
Right, they check the box. We bought the door.
If they just had a standard, cheap wooden door, they might actually know it's a risk. They might hire a security guard to stand in front of it. The sophisticated tool created a massive blind spot.
That makes so much sense. The illusion of security is often way more dangerous than a known vulnerability. Okay, so if we accept that tools alone aren't controls and that just throwing capital expenditure at the problem just accelerates this bystander effect,
Hmm.
how does Davis's framework propose we actually build a resilient architecture?
Well, the framework breaks enterprise defense down into 4 interlocking pillars:
Okay, what are they?
organizational, technological, physical, and personnel. And the critical thesis here is systemic interdependency.
Meaning they all rely on each other.
Yes, these are not isolated silos. They are load-bearing structures. If one pillar fails, the structural integrity of the whole system is compromised.
Right, like the door example.
Exactly. We just discussed a failure where physical and organizational pillars clashed. The physical door was completely undermined by the organizational demand for speed.
Yeah.
You can spend your entire budget fortifying the technological pillar with the best encryption available. But if an attacker can simply tailgate an employee through a physical turnstile and plug directly into a local terminal, your technological investment is worthless.
I really want to focus heavily on the organizational controls here because I see organizations completely misunderstand this pillar on a daily basis.
Oh, constantly.
When corporate leadership hears organizational control, they almost universally default to bureaucracy. They draft like a 200-page policy manual, they bury it on some obscure SharePoint site, and they mandate that every employee click a button saying they read it.
Which is pure compliance theater. It is
Yes.
administration, not shape. It is Verwalt, not Gestalten.
Exactly.
The assumption that a static document governs dynamic human behavior under stress, that is a fundamental leadership failure.
Yeah.
Let's actually illustrate why this administrative approach just shatters under pressure. Let's
Yeah.
look at a very specific, high-stakes operational reality.
Yeah.
Let's analyze the 3 a.m. scenario.
Okay, yes. Let's set the stage for that. So it's 3:00 a.m. on a Sunday morning during a long holiday weekend.
The absolute worst time.
The corporate offices are completely empty. In the Security Operations Center, a junior SOC analyst is monitoring the network traffic, and they spot an anomaly that escalates rapidly. They are watching in real time gigabytes of highly sensitive proprietary customer data being exfiltrated from the internal network to an unrecognized external IP address. And it's located in some non-extradition jurisdiction.
It is the absolute nightmare scenario. It's an active, catastrophic data breach in progress.
Right.
And the junior analyst has eyes on the bleeding. They can see the specific server connection that's facilitating the transfer.
Yeah.
But the organization's idea of an organizational control, that 200-page policy document you mentioned.
Yeah, the SharePoint PDF.
Right. It dictates a strict chain of command. In order to sever an active external connection to a production server, the policy mandates that the analyst must secure explicit, documented approval from the VP of Engineering.
But it's 3:00 a.m. on a holiday weekend. The VP of Engineering is asleep. Their phone is on Do Not Disturb.
Exactly. So the analyst calls the number. It goes straight to voicemail. They send an urgent message on Slack or Teams. No response. The analyst is now sitting in the dark, completely paralyzed, watching the company's most critical assets leave the network. They know exactly how to stop it, but they do not have the delegated authority to act.
So the organizational control has actively prevented the technological control from being deployed.
Precisely.
Okay, that sounds incredibly frustrating in theory, but what happens in reality? Because we have to acknowledge the complexity of the environments we are talking about here.
Of course.
Enterprise infrastructure is incredibly fragile. You cannot simply grant junior analysts unrestricted authority to unilaterally shut down production servers without executive oversight.
I know, it sounds risky.
Right, because if that analyst misinterprets the data and they accidentally sever the connection to the company's largest enterprise client who's just running like a scheduled automated backup,
The business grinds to a halt.
the business could face millions of dollars in SLA penalties and severe reputational damage. There has to be a structural chain of command to prevent junior staff from causing self-inflicted outages.
Let's let that tension sit for a moment, because that is the exact fiduciary argument every executive will make in a boardroom, and it sounds entirely rational.
It does.
But if we examine the systemic reality of modern cyber threats, we have to confront an uncomfortable asymmetric truth.
Which is?
Delay equals risk. Automated ransomware and exfiltration scripts execute in milliseconds. Human bureaucracy operates in hours.
Yeah, that's a massive mismatch.
If your organizational control relies on contacting your unreachable executive during a crisis, it is not actually a security control. It is an elaborate bureaucratic alibi.
Wait, a bureaucratic alibi, meaning it exists primarily to protect the management layer, not the data.
Yes, it exists to protect management from liability. The executive team has designed an architecture where, in the aftermath of the breach, they can stand before the board of directors and say, well, we had a robust, documented policy in place. The junior analyst simply failed to follow the proper escalation path.
Oh, wow. So it just shifts the blame downward.
Exactly. But the customer data is still gone. The company is still facing regulatory ruin. True organizational control isn't about layering red tape to distribute blame.
Then what is it?
It is about providing explicit delegated authority before the crisis ever materializes.
So it means giving that analyst the power to make the call and actually accepting the risk of a false positive.
It means comprehensive training, yes. But more importantly, it requires immense leadership clarity. It means empowering that junior analyst to recognize a true positive, giving them the unquestioned authority to sever the connection at 3 a.m.
And backing them up.
Yes, culturally guaranteeing that leadership will stand behind them on Monday morning, even if it turns out to be a false alarm. If you prioritize the fear of SLA penalties over the reality of an active breach, you have chosen your risk profile.
That is heavy, but it perfectly bridges us into what is arguably the most misunderstood and honestly frequently mocked pillar of the four: personnel controls.
Oh, absolutely.
When you bring up personnel controls in a corporate IT setting, everyone immediately thinks of those mandatory annual cybersecurity training videos.
The ones everyone hates.
Yes,
Yeah.
the ones with the terrible acting where you have to answer whether you should write your password on a sticky note. People just click through the quiz as fast as humanly possible to get back to their actual jobs. It is seen as an HR requirement, not a security mechanism.
It's the absolute pinnacle of compliance theater. But the sources we are analyzing today, drawing on modern pedagogy and organizational psychology, they argue something far more radical.
That's that.
They argue that psychological safety is a hard security control. It is not a soft, progressive HR initiative to make people feel fuzzy and comfortable. It is a structural defense mechanism, just as vital as your network firewall or your encryption key management.
I really want to dig into the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
Because labeling psychological safety as a hard control is going to sound like idealistic nonsense to a lot of seasoned IT directors.
I know it is.
How does the emotional state or the psychological comfort of an engineering team translate into tangible, measurable network defense?
Okay, let's look at the 4:30 p.m. Tuesday mistake.
The Tuesday mistake, okay.
This isn't a malicious insider threat. This is just a product of our current work environments. We have a junior software developer. They're exhausted, they're heavily caffeinated, and they're rushing to meet an aggressive sprint deadline.
A deadline handed down by a project manager who is completely detached from the technical reality of the code, probably.
Exactly. So the developer is pushing a new feature update to a public code repository. And in their rush, they make a simple, completely human error.
What do?
They accidentally hard code a root credential, an administrative access key for the company's entire cloud infrastructure directly into the public code commit.
Oh no, so the keys to the kingdom are just sitting out there on the public internet waiting to be scraped by automated bots.
Exactly. Now, 5 minutes later, the developer reviews the commit and realizes what they have done. The adrenaline spikes. The panic sets in.
I'm sweating just thinking about it.
What happens in the next 60 seconds will determine the survival of the organization. And it depends entirely on the leadership culture.
Okay, let's contrast the two potential environments. What happens in a traditional authoritarian culture?
If that developer works in a fear-based culture, a place where the CTO frequently berates people over missed deadlines, where mistakes are punished publicly to make an example of the offender.
Where performance improvement plans are weaponized.
Yes. What is the developer's most rational course of action in that exact moment? Their primary objective instantly shifts from protecting the corporate infrastructure to protecting their own livelihood.
They aren't going to tell anyone. They are going to try to fix it quietly.
They will attempt to cover up. They will scramble to delete the code commit. They will try to scrub the repository history.
Which doesn't actually remove it from the internet once it's out there.
Exactly. But they don't know that, or they're panicking. They will absolutely not alert the security operations team because that would trigger an incident report with their name explicitly on it. Right.
They will just sit at their desk, sweating, hoping that an adversarial bot didn't scrape that exposed credential during the 5-minute window it was public. And in cybersecurity, silence is deadly.
Yeah, the vulnerability just compounds.
The compromised credential sits in the architecture like a dormant pathogen.
But consider the alternative here, because I have to challenge this premise.
Go for it.
If we follow this logic, you are essentially arguing that if an employee commits gross negligence, leaving the digital vault door wide open and jeopardizing the entire enterprise management, should just, thank them for their honesty. If there are no severe punitive consequences for catastrophic failure, aren't we just incentivizing sloppiness? We have to punish the mistake to enforce operational rigor and maintain high standards, don't we?
I will address that directly, because it is the most persistent and dangerous misconception in corporate leadership today. Punishing the mistake creates the cover-up.
The cover-up destroys the company. You have to intellectually separate human error, which is statistically inevitable in complex systems, regardless of how much you threaten your workforce, from actual deliberate malice.
So you're saying error is just a given?
It is a given. A mature learning culture recognizes that if a tired, stressed developer can accidentally expose a root credential, the failure is not simply the human. The failure is systemic.
The failure is that the system allowed a single point of human error to be catastrophic in the first place.
Precisely. Why was there no automated pre-commit hook to scan for secrets before the code was pushed?
Right.
Why was the developer under such intense scheduling pressure that they were bypassing basic code review? In a psychologically safe culture, that developer knows that their employment is not at risk for an honest mistake.
So they speak up.
They are incentivized to immediately message the security team and say, I messed up. I exposed a root key 5 minutes ago. We need to roll our credentials across the infrastructure right now.
And then the breach window is closed in 6 minutes, rather than sitting open for 6 months.
And the systemic vulnerability is identified and patched. If your employees are more terrified of their own executive leadership team than they are of external threat actors, your perimeter is already breached.
That is such a stark way to put it.
You do not have personnel controls. You have a ticking clock of hidden compounding mistakes. And, this is also deeply tied to the demographic shifts Davis mentions in his work.
Oh, so?
Newer generations of workers, millennials, Gen Z, they simply will not tolerate the authoritarian industrial era management styles. If you scream at them for an error, they won't just cover it up. They will quit.
And then you lose the institutional knowledge, and you are left with a massive security gap anyway.
Exactly.
It's easy to preach psychological safety and structural resilience on a calm Tuesday afternoon when it is just one developer dealing with a mistake, though. But theory has a habit of completely disintegrating when the business is actively bleeding. Davis emphasizes that security is not a static state, it is a maturity level.
Yes, and a maturity level only truly reveals itself under extreme goal conflicts.
Right. We need to explore this concept of the normalization of exceptions. Let's stress test this entire philosophy with the crucible.
The Friday 4.00 p.m. scenario. This is where leadership is actually defined.
I really want to paint this picture clearly for everyone listening. It is 4.00 p.m. on a Friday. The organization has a massive, highly anticipated brand relaunch scheduled to go live at 5:00 p.m.
High stakes.
Very high. This isn't just a routine update. The CEO has personally promised the board of directors and major shareholders that this specific launch will drive a 20% bump in quarterly revenue.
So everyone is watching.
Everyone. There's $2 million of digital advertising spend queued up and ready to fire across global platforms the moment the clock strikes 5. Careers are literally on the line. The tension is palpable.
Okay, the scene is set.
And at 4:15 p.m., the external marketing vendor responsible for the analytics tracking calls the IT director in an absolute panic.
The worst phone call you can possibly receive on a Friday.
Exactly. The vendor explains that there is a critical tracking bug in the live production environment. If it isn't fixed immediately, the analytics won't capture any data.
Which means the $2 million ad spend will fly completely blind over the entire weekend.
Yes, generating zero measurable ROI. So the vendor states that their normal restricted access portal is too slow to diagnose the issue. They demand emergency, unrestricted root administrative access directly to the live production database.
So their engineers can go in and manually fix the code right now.
Right. But the organization, naturally, has a strict organizational control, a policy that mandates a 48-hour security review and approval process for any third party requesting root access to production systems.
As they should.
Exactly. But the chief marketing officer is in the room screaming that they're about to incinerate $2 million. The CEO is staring at the IT director. What is the decision?
It's the ultimate test.
Because if you just rigidly say, follow the policy, I think you are ignoring the fiduciary reality of the situation. If the CEO halts the launch, that is a guaranteed measurable loss of $2 million.
It is.
It is an immediate hit to the bottom line. The CEO will have to face a furious board on Monday morning to explain why they missed the quarterly targets over a theoretical, unproven security risk. The rational business decision is to grant the exception, give the vendor the access, and secure the revenue. Business is a business, right?
It is an agonizing position. You are articulating the exact pressure vector that fractures corporate defenses every single day.
So what do you do?
Let's analyze the systemic consequences of the CEO granting that exception. If the CEO overrides the established security protocol to salvage the launch, they are sending a clear, undeniable signal to the entire organization.
That security is optional.
That security is merely a theatrical performance. It is a luxury that the company indulges in only when it is convenient. The very second it threatens revenue, operational speed, or, frankly, executive ego, the rules are instantly abandoned.
The compromise becomes the culture. Every department will now demand emergency exceptions for their projects. Hey, you did it for marketing, do it for me.
Yes. The shortcut becomes the new standard operating procedure. That is the normalization of exceptions. But beyond the cultural degradation, let's look at the technical reality here.
Okay.
Let's look at the true worst-case scenario that the executive team is completely ignoring because their cognitive bandwidth is entirely consumed by that $2 million.
What is the unseen risk in granting the vendor access? I mean, it's just a trusted marketing vendor.
The unseen risk is supply chain compromise. The reason you have a 48-hour review policy is to verify the integrity of the external connection. Because you bypassed it, you failed to discover that the marketing vendor's internal network is already compromised.
Oh, wow.
The vendor's lead developer, who is demanding the root access right now, has undetected malware lurking on their laptop.
So by handing over emergency, unrestricted root access to save the tracking pixels,
The executive team has just willingly handed a cyber syndicate a direct, unmonitored tunnel straight into the live customer database.
they just bypass all their own technological pillars. The firewall doesn't matter if you hand the attacker the keys.
The technological pillar was bypassed by a failure in the organizational and personnel pillars. Over the weekend, while the CMO was popping champagne, celebrating the successful deployment of the ad campaign, the attackers silently exfiltrate millions of credit card numbers, hashed passwords, and personal addresses.
That is brutal.
And on Monday morning, instead of facing the board over a delayed launch, the CEO is hit with a $4 million ransomware extortion demand, plus massive regulatory fines under GDPR or CCPA, and permanent reputational ruin.
A minor analytics tracking issue just mutated into an existential threat to the entire enterprise.
Exactly.
That is a sobering reality, but it presents a massive operational dilemma. How do leaders survive this crucible without completely paralyzing the business?
It's hard.
Because you cannot operate a modern enterprise in a perpetual state of paranoia, assuming every single vendor is compromised. If you demand a 48-hour review for everything, your competitors will crush you on speed.
They will.
Leaders need a mental framework to pause time when the pressure is screaming at them to move fast.
Yeah.
How do they operationalize that pause?
They need a structural mechanism to force reflection. And this is where Davis introduces a vital tool from the triarchy of modern leadership.
What is it called?
The consequences compass. It is a framework designed explicitly to combat what he calls blind actionism.
Blind actionism.
It's the illusion of leadership through perpetual motion, the urge to do something, anything, just to feel a sense of control over a chaotic situation.
Let's dive into the biology of that, because this isn't just a corporate bad habit, it's physiological, right?
It is entirely physiological. Under extreme stress, like our Friday 4.00 p.m. scenario, the human brain's amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex.
Right, fight or flight.
The system floods with cortisol and adrenaline. Your reaction time increases dramatically, which is great for escaping a physical predator. But your reflection time and your analytical capacity absolutely plummets.
You get cognitive tunnel vision.
Yes, the brain desperately craves fast, simple clarity to alleviate the intense anxiety of the moment. And the fastest way to alleviate the anxiety of the screaming CMO is to just hand over the password.
I imagine it's very similar to hitting a patch of black ice while driving.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right, because my instinct, my immediate physiological reaction is to panic, slam my foot on the brake, and jerk the steering wheel as hard as I can away from the skid to try and force the car back into control.
Exactly. Your brain is aggressively trying to reassert dominance over the environment.
Yeah.
But the physics of the vehicle dictate that if you slam the brakes, you lock the wheels.
You lose all remaining traction.
You spin out, and you guarantee a catastrophic crash. The blind actionism causes the disaster.
So the counterintuitive, mature response, the thing you actually have to train yourself to do against your own survival instincts, is to take your foot completely off the gas, avoid the brake pedal entirely, and steer smoothly into the skid until the tires naturally regain traction.
Exactly. Even though it feels terrifying, it feels like you are surrendering control while in mortal danger.
But it is the only physical way to survive the event.
And steering into the skid in corporate leadership means leaning into the uncertainty and the discomfort of the delay, rather than trying to instantly kill the problem with a blunt instrument like bypassing security protocols.
Right.
The consequences compass is the methodology for steering into the skid. It requires leaders to pause, despite the screaming pressure, and systematically ask 4 specific questions before making the decision.
Okay, walk us through the compass. How do we apply it to the Friday launch scenario?
Question 1. What is the best case scenario of this decision? In our example, the best case is we grant the access, the vendor fixes the bug, the launch happens at 5:00 p.m., and we capture the data from the $2 million ad spend.
Okay, easy enough. Question 2.
Question 2. What are the secondary benefits? Well, the CMO is happy, the board sees the revenue bump, and the vendor maintains their contract.
Right. And question 3.
Question 3. What are the immediate costs? We violate our own compliance frameworks, we set a dangerous cultural precedent that policies are optional, and we consume significant internal political capital.
Honestly, those first 3 questions are exactly what the CEO is already instinctively calculating. That is why they want to grant the access.
Which is why the compass hinges entirely on the 4th question. The 4th question is mandatory.
What is it?
What is the absolute worst-case scenario of this decision?
Ah.
By forcing the implicit, ignored risk to become explicit and verbalized, the cognitive math of the room fundamentally changes.
So if the IT director and the CEO take 3 minutes to ask that 4th question, they're forced to say out loud in front of the CMO. The absolute worst case scenario is that the vendor's laptop is compromised, and by giving them unrestricted root access to save the analytics, we give an extortion syndicate the ability to encrypt our entire customer database and destroy the company.
Yes. Once you articulate that outcome, the perspective shifts violently. Suddenly, delaying a marketing launch by an hour or even a weekend doesn't seem like a catastrophic failure of leadership.
Right. It seems like the only rational, mathematically sound choice available. You are balancing a guaranteed $2 million delay against a potential $50 million extinction event.
Exactly.
But I have to interrupt again here.
Sure.
Because we keep assuming that people in these environments behave rationally when given a framework. A VP of product or a director of IT might be getting 50 emergency access requests a day.
They're completely overwhelmed.
They do not have 3 minutes to sit by the metaphorical fire and ponder the philosophical worst-case scenarios for every single JIRA ticket. They are evaluated, compensated, and promoted based on deployment speed and feature delivery. If you tell an engineering team to use a consequences compass on every access request, they will tell you that you are grinding the business to an absolute halt.
I completely understand the friction of that argument. The pressure to maintain velocity is a literal addiction in the modern enterprise.
It really is.
It provides a constant dopamine hit of past completion. Stopping to utilize the compass creates immense psychological discomfort because it forces leaders to confront the multitude of ways they might fail.
Yeah, nobody wants to think about that.
But the argument that this level of reflection fatally slows down the business is a false dichotomy. Davis refers to this concept as the 1 second you avoid.
The 1 second you avoid, explain that.
Front-loading the friction is the only sustainable way to survive in a complex system. You are making a strategic trade. You are trading 3 minutes of deliberate, highly uncomfortable friction today to prevent 3 months of catastrophic, business-ending downtime next year.
Wow.
The 1 second you actively avoid by blindly stamping approved on a vendor access request just to clear your inbox, that exact second of avoidance, is almost always where the fatal structural error is introduced into the system. You're just deferring the pain and allowing it to compound with interest.
You have to be willing to suffer a little bit of operational pain now to avoid a complete amputation later.
Exactly.
And this desperate addiction to speed, this urge to bypass critical thinking to get that dopamine hit of clearing the queue, it is now being put into absolute hyperdrive by the most disruptive technological force in modern business, artificial intelligence.
Oh, absolutely. AI is the ultimate accelerator. It accelerates our capabilities, but it equally accelerates our vulnerabilities.
For sure.
When the cybersecurity industry talks about AI, they almost exclusively focus their anxiety on external technical threat models. They talk about prompt injection attacks, malicious data poisoning, or shadow AI.
Where employees are uploading proprietary source code into public large language models to debug it.
Right. All of which are entirely valid, terrifying threats that need to be mitigated.
But there's more to it than that.
There is. If we view AI through the lens of Davis's leadership frameworks and systemic responsibility, the greatest vulnerability isn't a technical exploit.
What is it?
The greatest threat is psychological, is a phenomenon we can call cognitive convenience.
Cognitive convenience. Let's really unpack the mechanics of that. We discussed earlier that the human brain is essentially an energy hoarding organ, always looking for heuristics and shortcuts to reduce cognitive load.
Exactly. Deep analytical thinking system 2, thinking, consumes a massive amount of metabolic energy. The brain wants to avoid it if possible,
Lazy by design.
pretty much. So when you present a human being with a perfectly articulated, grammatically flawless, highly confident risk assessment generated by an AI, or a clean, seemingly elegant block of code snippet, the brain experiences a profound sense of relief.
The internal monologue is, the machine did the heavy lifting. The machine is smarter than me. I can relax.
Yes. The brain shifts immediately from effortful, critical analysis into relaxed automatic acceptance.
Hmm.
We effectively and willingly delegate our professional judgment to a statistical algorithm simply to save mental energy.
Right.
And because AI acts as a massive amplifier of existing culture, if your organizational culture already incentivizes cutting corners, if your developers are exhausted, terrified of deadlines, and lacking psychological safety, AI will scale that negligence to disastrous levels.
Because they'll just accept whatever it spits out.
They will take AI-generated code that contains subtle, complex vulnerabilities, and they will push it straight to the production environment without a second glance, because it provides the ultimate cognitive convenience.
That dynamic breaks down instantly under pressure, doesn't it?
It does.
If I am a junior developer and I am 2 days behind on my sprint and the AI gives me a block of infrastructure as code that appears to work perfectly, I'm going to use it. I do not have the time nor the incentive to painstakingly verify every single line of syntax if I know the machine is statistically right 95% of the time.
And that is exactly where the aviation autopilot analogy becomes critical for modern IT leaders.
How does that apply?
Well, modern commercial airliners fly themselves for the vast majority of a flight. The autopilot systems are incredibly advanced. They optimize routes, they save fuel, they reduce pilot fatigue.
Just as generative AI optimizes code, saves developer time, and reduces cognitive fatigue.
The parallel is exact. But what happens when that commercial airliner flies into a severe, highly unpredictable thunderstorm?
Things go wrong.
The external pitot tubes freeze over. The sensors start feeding conflicting data to the flight computer. The autopilot gets confused by the ambiguity, and it attempts to pitch the nose of the plane up to a dangerous angle, risking a catastrophic aerodynamic stall.
And if the human pilots aren't actively monitoring the situation,
If the human pilots have surrendered their sovereignty to the machine, if their manual flying skills have severely atrophied because they have relied entirely on the autopilot for years, they won't recognize the stall until it's too late. The plane crashes.
that's terrifying.
In the context of our discussion, digital sovereignty means maintaining an absolute unyielding grip on the yoke. It means owning your human judgment even when the machine offers you an easier path.
It really comes down to the difference between delegating a task and delegating responsibility.
Yes, precisely.
You can delegate the task of writing boilerplate code or drafting a preliminary risk assessment to an AI, but you cannot delegate the responsibility for the outcome.
That is the defining line of modern leadership. Task delegation versus responsibility delegation. Think about the harsh, unforgiving reality of the aftermath of a catastrophic breach.
Right.
When the data is gone and the $4 million regulatory fine lands on your desk, the government agency does not sue the algorithm.
No, they sue the company.
When the angry shareholders demand answers on a disastrous quarterly earnings call, you cannot subpoena a large language model. You cannot put an AWS server rack on the witness stand to testify. The liability, the moral weight, and the severe legal consequences fall entirely and squarely on the shoulders of the human leadership team.
You can't fire the AI. The CEO is the one who has to sit in front of the congressional hearing.
Exactly. Digital sovereignty means utilizing technology as a powerful amplifier for your capabilities, not as an excuse for the abdication of your accountability.
Right.
If you surrender that final cognitive authority to the machine simply because of cognitive convenience, you are not actually leading an organization. You are merely a passenger on a very fast, very dangerous trajectory.
So bringing all of this conceptual framework together into the operational reality of a business, we have explored the security paradox, the failure of bureaucratic rules without operational clarity, the absolute structural necessity of psychological safety, surviving the crucible of extreme goal conflicts, and maintaining digital sovereignty against the seductive convenience of AI.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. But how do leaders actually manifest this philosophy in their daily operations? What does the application of Gestaltenstadt-Verwalten look like in practice?
The real-world application begins with recognizing that security is not an IT project with the defined end date.
Okay.
You do not achieve security on a Friday afternoon, check a box on a compliance form, and walk away. Security is a continuous living cultural indicator. The way an organization handles security tells you everything you need to know about their overall leadership health.
That makes sense.
Let's look at web fraud prevention as a perfect complex example of this.
Web fraud prevention. So we're talking about defending against spoofed domains, fake login portals, manipulated payment gateways, synthetic identity creation, all of that.
Yes, and traditionally, companies treat web fraud purely as a technical database problem. But it is actually an issue of structural trust. If a customer cannot inherently trust that the login screen they are interacting with is actually your company, your brand equity evaporates overnight. In a VUCA world where digital interactions are the primary interface for business, trust is your only durable asset. And how an organization approaches fraud prevention reveals their incentive structures.
How does fraud prevention reveal incentive structures?
Because the ultimate undeniable test of a leader is what they choose to measure and what they choose to reward.
Right. What gets measured gets managed.
And human nature, especially in competitive corporate environments, craves recognition and advancement. In many traditional corporate cultures, the only people who receive promotions, the only people who get the massive year-end bonuses and the public praise at company town halls are the firefighters.
The heroes who swoop in at the last possible minute to fix a blazing disaster.
Exactly.
Like the systems engineer who stays awake for 48 hours straight over a holiday weekend to manually restore the corrupted database after a ransomware attack. Everyone gives him a standing ovation on Monday morning.
They do. And that engineer deserves praise for their efforts, certainly. But we have to look at the systemic incentive.
Which is?
If a corporate culture only promotes and praises the firefighters, they are subconsciously but powerfully incentivizing their workforce to quietly start fires.
Oh, wow.
Or, at the very least, they are incentivizing people to completely ignore the smell of smoke. Why would a smart, ambitious developer proactively spend their Tuesday fixing a minor, unglamorous vulnerability in the authentication flow when they know absolutely nobody will notice or care?
Right.
The rational career move is to wait until that vulnerability is exploited, let it become a crisis, and then swoop in to fix it and claim the hero's reward.
That is a deeply toxic incentive structure. You are essentially paying people to allow the system to degrade. So what is the alternative? What should modern leaders do differently to shape the culture?
Leaders must do the incredibly difficult work of learning to value, quantify, and publicly celebrate the non-events.
The non-events.
They must transition from a culture that worships firefighters to a culture that rewards the architects who ensure the building never catches fire in the first place.
Rewarding a non-event. I can hear the HR directors groaning right now. That sounds incredibly difficult to quantify on an annual performance review. Congratulations on your stellar performance this year. Absolutely nothing happened.
It is difficult, which is why most organizations fail to do it. It requires deep technical understanding from leadership, but it is essential.
Yeah.
The fact that nothing happened during a massive global spike in zero-day ransomware attacks, the fact that your customer data remained perfectly isolated and secure while your competitors were breached, that is not luck.
No, it's preparation.
That is a monumental, hard-fought achievement of human coordination, rigorous code review, and resilient technical architecture.
Yeah.
It needs to be treated as a major operational victory. True leadership, as Davis outlines, is the willingness to suffer short-term, highly visible pain, like delaying that 5.0 p.m. Friday product launch, or spending weeks refactoring legacy code for long-term systemic integrity. The silence of a secure system is the ultimate reward.
You have to reward the silence. That is an incredibly powerful paradigm shift. We have traveled a massive intellectual distance today, examining the psychology, the biology, and the systemic realities of enterprise defense. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative challenge to take into your next board meeting, your next architectural review, or your next sprint planning session. The next time your organization faces a security incident, whether it's a minor data leak, a near miss with a compromised vendor, or a full-scale ransomware extortion attempt, your very first instinct will be technical. You will want to immediately run a forensic audit on the source code. You will want to demand the firewall logs from the vendor. You will want to find the specific, stressed out employee who clicked the malicious phishing links so you can assign blame, fire them, and feel like you have definitively solved the problem. Don't do that.
No.
Instead, go back and read your executive meeting minutes from 6 months ago. Look for the project timelines that were aggressively squeezed to satisfy an unrealistic quarterly target. Look for the architectural decisions that were rushed in the name of pragmatism and speed. Look for the exact moments when a junior engineer's valid security concerns were waved away by senior management because the business needed to move fast and capture the revenue. If you look closely enough at the culture, you will find the exact moment your system was breached, long before a hacker ever touched your network.
Security is not a control problem. It's a leadership decision.